Hello, listeners, and welcome to our 6th episode of From Print to Podcast, presented by the Roanoke Magazine. You already know we like to have a lot of fun on every episode, and we love showcasing even more of what you'll read about in every issue. In this episode, however, we're taking a more serious look at one of the anchor features in our May-June 2023 Best of Roanoke issue, The Fight to End Homelessness in Roanoke. Writer Aila Boyd showed an extraordinary look into the homelessness issues found in Virginia's Blue Ridge, and the stats are startling, especially after, or perhaps even because of, COVID-19 pandemic. Today we'll speak with City Council member and Vice-Mayor Joe Cobb, as well as 2 local nonprofit organizations doing all they can to help those in need. We'll also list several of the resources mentioned over on our podcast page at theroanoker.com. With special thanks to today's guest and our writer Aila Boyd, let's learn more about what it means to be homeless in Roanoke and how you can help with this important local issue. Our first guest on today's bonus episode is Roanoke City Council member and Vice Mayor Joe Cobb, who was included in Aila's feature on the fight against homelessness in Roanoke. Hi, Joe. Thanks so much for coming on our show today.
Hi, how are you?
Great. Thank you for being here. Joe is a city council member who has always made it very clear that citizens can speak openly about their concerns or issues, and your open door policy means you probably hear from a lot of people in the community. I'm sure you get plenty of questions, concerns, and hopefully even some positive suggestions, yes?
I do.
Good.
I do, the whole range.
Good. So if you don't mind giving just a real quick overview of your background and your city council membership now that you're such an important leader in our region.
Sure. So I moved to Roanoke in 2001. I was a stranger. I didn't know anybody here. I kind of jumped right in to start meeting people. One of the first people I met was Pearl Fu, who's a legend around here.
Of course, local colors and
she
much
got
more.
me involved in local colors. I started out working in the arts community with Roanoke Symphony. Went back into pastoral ministry, and then for 8 years was pastor of the Metropolitan Community Church of the Blue Ridge in Roanoke. And that really brought me more to the forefront in terms of social justice and equity and equality, not only for the LGBTQ plus community, but for people who are marginalized in general. So being a voice for them or empowering their own voice to be a part of decision making. And when I left that work in 2017, I wondered what I could do to expand that footprint of social justice and equity work. And a friend of mine, actually Juna Osborne, a former councilwoman, encouraged me to run, and I decided to and was elected. She and I were both elected in 2018, and then I just got reelected this last fall.
Feels like you just got in there like last week. I mean, time really flew by. Well, that's great. What are some of the things that you've really focused on in the last few years since then?
Well, I think access is really important, just so people know they can access and know that their council members are available to talk with them and meet with them. Through COVID, I learned how resilient our city is. I mean, I knew our city was amazing before, but our ability to respond as quickly as we did, to recover, to really be adaptable and agile during that time, and then to see that resilience kind of keep showing up, even through some of our greatest challenges, which we've seen get even more challenging since COVID.
Right.
So that's something I'm proud of. I really am proud of our city's work in addressing and reducing gun violence. That continues to be a challenge. We've seen that increase. But to see the collaborative work that's taking place between city government, community partners, the police department, and a lot of our city agencies has been really powerful. And because so much of our work has been focused on prevention and intervention, those results take longer to see because they're so relationship focused. Sure. I also think just raising awareness about the economic strength of our city has been a thing of mine. I'm so proud of the support we give to our schools. We don't see the battles that we see in other communities where the schools, always having to beg for or fight for money. We just upfront say, this is one of our top commitments. And I would, the other thing I would add is that our focus on addressing and raising compensation for our city employees and starting with community safety employees has been a real significant priority, and we've made significant progress.
And obviously keeps our city going. I mean,
it does.
Obviously,
all those essential services. The new transit facility for Valley Metro is very exciting.
Yes.
So there are a lot of things to be proud of.
Yeah, a lot of investment into
Yeah.
the city that's going to turn out obviously in our favor.
Right.
So in our feature, specifically about homelessness today, which is our conversation, we're talking about, in the note, you had noted that the number has actually been reduced by 60% over the last decade, thanks in part to organizations like Blue Ridge Continuum of Care and Blue Ridge Interagency Council on Homelessness. I was wondering if you had any more updated numbers in terms of the spike in homelessness, how we can realistically address any of those numbers, what they mean.
Well, I don't know. I don't think the January point in time data has been released yet. So
At this point in time, yes, you're correct. I looked yesterday to be sure, and it was still.
I know it's close to being released, but I will say that my understanding is that it continues to reflect some of the increase we've seen in the number of unsheltered people, and that there is a range to that. So you have some people who identify as unsheltered because of chronic social anxiety. They just can't, because of severe mental health. They can't be in close quarters with other people. You have some that are still scared of COVID, and that continues to be a difficult issue. The COVID funding that was available to house people in hotels, that money it's no more.
Right.
And in fact, the hotels that we were working with are no more. So that's created a few challenges.
And the numbers don't include people who are, for example, living on friends' couches and things like that.
No.
Right.
Now, they might identify as homeless,
Right.
but not necessarily unsheltered. So when you look at school data, that's one of the numbers that is reflected in that data, where the phrase doubling up, it means they're staying with somebody.
Right. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, because I
Yeah.
do have some numbers from RCPS, which were really critical to a later part of the conversation.
The thing that was, I guess, not surprising but concerning that everyone took notice of is that we saw a pretty dramatic increase in unsheltered youth and young adults. And that for those willing to self-identify, part of that increase was LGBTQ youth.
Right. And so Aila had mentioned, so in talking to her about things that don't fit in print, right? We can only fit so much information in 4 pages. And unfortunately, there's just so much data and information to go off of. But she specifically noted your incredible passion for helping the youth, particularly in LGBTQ plus community. So really quick, at the time of this episode's recording, Roanoke City Public Schools is reporting for the 2022-2023 school year, 573 students have experienced homelessness in their district. We know homelessness can take on many different forms, with students living in shelters while others stay in hotels or live with family and friends. That obviously gravely impacts a student, that routine that they desperately need to keep things moving, the stability and place to call home. RCPS actually is able to provide support for students and families who are experiencing housing instability through the federal McKinney-Vento program. And the school district is committed to providing support to students experiencing homelessness, providing programs to assist and help maintain successful academic experiences. And so for those who are interested, your child can enroll in school even if you have uncertain temporary housing or no permanent physical address. But in terms of these youth that you're speaking of, I mean, what resource? Why is this important? I mean, I know that's like a really broad question, but you're passionate about it, and I want to hear it from you.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the realities is, even though we've made so many strides in terms of acceptance of LGBTQ people, there are still situations, and unfortunately increasing situations, where youth are kicked out of their homes. They have no support at home. And so if they don't have that extended familial support or friend support, they're kind of on their own. There was a situation about a month ago where I learned about a transgender student kind of in that gap between high school and not quite 21. I actually think they were just under 18, but once we were able to determine, and this person self-identified as transgender, then we began looking at, well, what are our options? Because if this is a person considered a juvenile, there are limitations on where they can actually be sheltered. We don't have a dedicated, safe shelter space exclusively for LGBTQ people. most of our, if not all of our shelter programs have received extensive training and are making provisions for youth and persons who identify as LGBTQ. But even with that, the situation may not be conducive to that person's well-being. So there tend to be even more questions that arise when someone is LGBTQ and homeless, and so they don't have that family support. They may not have a lot of friend support. So we have to turn to those organizations in our city that are dedicated to that work, and whether it's mental health counselors that focus on transgender issues, Youth Saga, which is a great youth and young adult support group, the Roanoke Diversity Center, and then a growing number of people who are very interested in creating a safe house or safe shelter space for LGBTQ people in the community.
Do you think there might eventually come a time where there's a space just for them?
Yeah, I do. And I think it's going to come sooner rather than later.
Really?
Because more and more people are aware of this, and Roanoke wants to be a place that makes sure no one's falling through the gaps.
Right. Well, in talking about, that's a great point. And so back in 2021, we're going to talk a little slightly controversial in terms of what we're discussing, but Roanoke City Council in 21 passed a sidewalk ordinance that prohibited sleeping on sidewalks in the downtown district. And I remember that being pretty controversial. 6 months after implementation, City Manager Bob Cowell told WSLS that it was successful. Downtown encampments have left and they have not fined and arrested anybody. Again, this was about 6 months ago. However, that did lead to some public concern that just shifts into other neighborhoods and, under bridges and things like that, new camps. Are there any updates on that or how that's evolved since then?
Well, I think that's still part of the challenge.
Sure.
We still find that we're addressing how to get resources to people who are in encampments outside of the downtown area. I know that when Brian Mann with Park Roanoke came to talk with us recently about some of the things they've been doing in the parking garages, that one of the things they discovered were the number of people that were sleeping in the garages because they wanted a safe place that they could sleep. So our homeless assistance team works every day, as do our community partners, to try and connect people with resources that include housing, that include shelter, that include supportive services. And what we've discovered with some of the encampment situations is that some people are willing to receive those services. Some are just outright resistant. They don't want to have any part of it. And so,
is it a trust issue in that aspect? I mean, I know there's a number of factors.
I think some of it's trust, some of it, if you've got someone who has severe mental illness and has not been on medication in some time, you have to navigate that. Some people are just defiant. They just, they don't want anything. They just want to be where they are. But then that creates it creates a public health issue. Because often what I have seen with the encampments is that they become very spread out. It's hard to control, trash, belongings, and it can bring in. It can be detrimental not only to the people who are staying there. It can be detrimental to their health. But then the community around them. So we have to keep in mind the public health piece of that, and the goal is always to get somebody housed or sheltered, and to get them connected with the services they need. So, but it's true that once that left downtown, it started showing up in other parts of the city, and as we become aware of those, the homeless assistance team goes and tries to work with them, and then, in a worst case scenario, we would have to go in and remove them, and clean up the area.
Right. And Matt Cruikshank, who helps lead the HAT, so he is our Roanoke City's Human Services Administrator. And so his efforts over the last 11 years extend to bureaucratic work and direct service programs like Homeless Assistance Team HAT, which we'll call for short. That started in the 90s, actually. The team is an outreach program, in case you did not know this, that connects individuals who are on the streets to those services that are being provided. And so that includes everything from emergency services, financial help, and more. It was originally comprised of of 3 case members, and 2 new members were added recently when the city observed the growing need. They also offer interpreters for non-English speakers, which is really important. It's worth noting HAT has a great information and helpful videos on their website for those seeking those resources and for those who want to help and maybe aren't sure where to start. But in addition to the homeless assistance team, I'd love to know more about the programs and services you're talking about, how the city's providing for that.
So we work collaboratively with a lot of agencies, whether it is accessing mental health, whether it's accessing an ID. One of the organizations, the least of these ministries, is an afternoon and evening outreach program. So people can actually go to them and take showers as they can at the Rescue Mission. They can have outdoor storage lockers. All of these organizations have supplies that might be needed. We work very closely with the Fralin Free Clinic, which is part of the mission, to do outreach, because a lot of people who are experiencing homelessness have medical conditions that they may not get treated because they think it's going to cost them something.
Right. And you'll hear from, so Melissa from Ram House in our next segment, we'll talk a little bit about that. But Lee Clark also from the Rescue Mission he'll touch on that a little bit too, because I was curious. It's not just going in for, when you feel bad. It's they offer on a range of services that's really great for those who might not otherwise get those.
And for people in recovery or on the path of recovery. So we've seen the opioid epidemic just really spiral. And so we have the Drop-In Center and Virginia Harm Reduction Coalition, both of whom have mobile units that go out and provide harm reduction services for people who need them, and they stay connected with them. So this is very relationship-based work to see someone move from where they might be met to where they might be housed, and the services that continue. Another piece that's really important is what we call permanent supportive housing. And when Arch Services closed, they were the primary managers of the permanent supportive housing. And then the Council of Community Services Community Housing Resource Center, headed by Brian Burnett, took that over for 4 months. And he's supervising that work now, and that's going to be handed off to another agency probably June 1st, that will coordinate and manage that. But that process is taking someone who has been previously unsheltered and needs that kind of 24/7 supportive service to get them into housing, and then to make sure that they have access through case management to those services they need. And so it's really kind of diagnosing what their needs are and what services they need to connect with, and then matching them with those services.
And I was actually you sort of have a bird's eye view of this, right? You're not necessarily in Rescue Mission every single day, but from a bird's eye view, do you feel, or do you know of any gaps that maybe ideally would be filled by something that exists, or maybe something that a program that should come to fruition if somebody has a skill set and they want to know how to help fill a gap?
Well, yeah, I think, of course, all of the agencies have need for volunteers. Right. I think mental health support is a gap. It's not that we have excellent mental health providers in the area. It's just we don't have enough of them. So increasing the number of and availability of those is ideal. I think we mentioned earlier finding dedicated shelter space for LGBTQ people and those unique needs that they might have, continuing to support the substance abuse work that's being done, the medical support that's being done. And then I think for people who maybe have not been housed for a long time and are just experiencing that again for the first time, just making sure that they have that housing stability support. A lot of our shelter programs that also house people make sure there's like a housing stability coordinator or some people on staff that are dedicated to following up with them.
Lee even talks about like providing furniture and things like that. I mean, because that's expensive.
Kitchen items. I mean, you name it. It's like setting up house.
Right. And that's not easy for anybody, especially someone who really doesn't have much at the time.
Yeah. So whether it's, working through the Roanoke City Public Schools to help youth, or working through any of these agencies that are doing this on a day in, day out basis. Everybody has needs, and there's really, as a volunteer, you can kind of pick what you feel most comfortable doing and just dive right in and do it.
Right. And there's multiple opportunities. I mean, whether you're volunteering in the kitchen or sorting through clothes that are donated, I mean, there's any number of things that you can help with if monetarily, isn't really in the field right now.
I met a physician recently who works for the Fralin Free Clinic and has done that in her retirement. So depending on what your profession is, I'm sure there are probably mental health professionals who are continuing to do some of that work, even beyond what maybe they don't have a full caseload, and so they dedicate some of their additional work.
Right. What a wonderful thing for a retired, person who says, I really want to give back. How do I do that? Let's use all the education and knowledge I have to give back. That's really cool. Is there anything else you'd like to add? I know as a city council member, you really try to keep that open door policy and making sure that citizens know they can come to you if there's anything that they need.
Yeah. I think on this issue, I just encourage people to, sometimes when we see something that's concerning to us, we don't always just take a step back from it to see what the bigger picture is, or to reflect on the work that's already taking place.
That's really key. I think it's hard to start from scratch when there are organizations that are really would love the help that you're ready to give.
Yeah, and I think during COVID, because homelessness was more in our face, because it was more visible. I think it is very difficult for us as human beings to look at someone else who may reflect a vulnerability, someone else who is struggling, and then we recognize in ourselves, that could be me. But I think the more we reflect on that could be me, the more we connect with the humanity of each other and find a way to help someone access the help that they need.
Absolutely. It's sort of, I heard a lot about after the pandemic, we seek out companionship, we seek out relationships. We have been sort of thirsty for relationship building over the last few years. And I think that this is especially true in this instance when you don't see it every day or you don't connect with that person. So later on, you'll hear from Lee Clark talking about their podcast. And so they interviewed the guest there. And I think that's a great way to engage and have listeners really kind of, the picture sharpens up a little bit when you hear directly from someone experiencing whatever they're going through right now.
And it's very interesting. I was recently listening to a podcast called On Being, which Krista Tippett is the host, but she was interviewing the Surgeon General. And he has just released a program, an initiative to address the chronic loneliness and sense of separation that exists in our country. And I think it is so wise and so insightful, because it's what we're seeing. When people don't have a natural sense of how to connect with each other and feel isolated, and then when we further stigmatize someone's condition to define them, we enhance isn't the right word. We add to that sense of separation and loneliness. And so the challenge becomes, how do we rebuild community? How do we take that compassion that I believe each of us has and use that to connect with each other in a way that restores that intrinsic value of love and humanity.
And you've kind of hit it on the head. And again, Melissa and Lee both will also kind of share that Roanoke Valley, Virginia's Blue Ridge, we're giving, we're a community, we're solid, we're ready to help out our neighbor in our backyard. And I think that's really important because it shows kind of who we are as a community, not just as a city. Right. So anything else you wanted to add before we sign off?
No, it's great to be here. Thank you for bringing this really critical issue to the forefront and to your readers. And for anyone who wants to get involved, just reach out. We'll find a way to connect you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Joe, for being our guest on From Print to Podcast. We really appreciate your time today. We're very grateful for the information he has shared with us. If you have a citizen concern related to our homelessness episode, or in general, you can reach him on the Roanoke government website or email him at joseph.cobb, that's COBB, at roanokeva.gov. In In our next segment, we're sitting down with Melissa Woodson, Executive Director of Ram House. Thanks so much for being on our show today as we take a deeper dive into this important issue.
Thank you for talking about it. It's very important, especially now.
Yes, absolutely. Now, RAM, short for Roanoke Area Ministries, has been advocating for those facing or threatened by homelessness and hunger since 1971. And it's run by 9 employees and about 30 volunteers. Is that about right?
That's about right.
Cool. So your funding also mostly comes from donations and grants. Is that correct?
Yeah, but one thing that I'm really proud of, especially post-COVID, because a lot of money flowed in for help that was, federal money, and that's dried up. So one of the things that I'm so proud of is that the vast majority of the donations that come into Ram House are private. So what's happened is we're still out there, whereas the other people have had to say, no, we can't help you anymore.
Right. That's pretty wild. So before we dive a little bit deeper into that, I'd love to know more about your background. I mean, how did you get to this particular role?
Oh, it's interesting. I was mentioning to you earlier that I was a biology major. So I and I just realized as I was progressing that I wanted to do something that was for people. And one of the reasons that finally came to me is my parents. My parents were lower middle class, and back then, and I guess when they were younger, they didn't formally volunteer, but they helped everybody. My father would pull his wallet out and give people money on the streets. It's just the type of people that they were. So I think that as time evolved, the legacy of them has grown through me. And I've done a lot of nonprofit jobs, but my love has been helping the people who are the most vulnerable. I have a keen awareness of how difficult it is for them, and it's very fulfilling for me as a person. So that's why, even with an MBA, which I think is probably beneficial,
sure,
I came into Ram House. Had earlier worked for the YWCA at a shelter too. So it's this job to me is the capstone of my career, and I'm sure I'll retire from there. But there's a lot of goals that I have before I exit.
Sure. Well, and in terms of Ram House, let's talk about some of those goals. I mean, what do you feel is
they're big.
Some of your top priorities? Sure. What do you think are maybe your top 3 priorities if you had to list just a couple?
The building we've been in since 1986, and it isn't suiting what the board's strategic plan is. We do so much. I've talked to you guys about that. We do a day shelter where we give out hygiene products and we feed people, and we give out $300,000 a year to keep people in their homes to start with. Even last month, we helped 113 families, 204 people, and if you multiply that by 12, that's about 2,500 people a year we're keeping off the streets.
Right. You just listed that number for last month alone.
Yeah, that's for April. Yeah. So we do that, and we also feed community members and our shelter clients every day to the tune of about 160. Sometimes there's as many as 212, 220 people. So with this small staff, look at what we do.
Right.
And yet, I think our hopes are that we can do more. The reason we want to do more is because post-COVID and post this terrible epidemic of substance abuse, we're seeing people diving into despair. The mental health issues, some of the schizophrenia that we're dealing with, the bipolar issues, and the people who have addictions, it has escalated to a point where we kind of had our hands tied behind our back in terms of getting people housed. Last year, we housed 125 people who weren't housed at all, who were homeless, but we couldn't do more because they were too fragile to put into housing. So our dream is to have a facility where we're able to have office space and clinical care for people. And it's not a big secret in Roanoke that we do have an anchor gift to do so. But with not in my backyard issues right now, we are definitely looking for a building. And I hope that your listeners will keep us in mind, because I think it's Roanokers that are going to solve that problem for us.
It's right here in our community.
It's right here. And I think, there are people that own buildings that aren't on the market, and they may see that it's a good location. We're looking for something that's, not more than a mile from downtown, because that's where the main services are located. So we're even doing a commercial right now asking the community to help us. And I think with the giving nature that I find here, that's going to happen. Having that anchor gift is huge. So it's going to be more cost effective for the community to move us so that the future doesn't fall into what we're seeing in other cities.
Right.
And that's what we don't want to happen. We feel like Ram House is key to keeping Roanoke in a place where we're giving people an opportunity to get better. But the way we're doing things now, there's a lot of folks out there, they're doing a lot of good stuff, but it's become so critical now that we need to be doing more.
Right. Well, and so in talking about where that money goes, and so you've touched just very briefly on what RAM offers in terms of hygienic products in the daily. Let's talk a little bit more about the services that you're offering to your guests, to those who are in need. What are some of the things that they'll find there when they come to you for help?
The shelter clients, a lot of times when they come in the mornings, they're exhausted. They're too critical to go to another shelter. They have behavior issues where they can't contain themselves in a shelter overnight. So a lot of them live this horrible life, living outside in the heat. The heat's going to be coming up, insect bitten, dehydrated, sunburnt, it's foot issues.
And that's just the summer.
Yes. So when they come into our shelter, we do provide what they need. We have washers and dryers. We have places for them to keep their possessions so they don't have to carry them all over town. So that's huge. We have Support Services LLC that's coming in on Monday. Again, the building isn't as great as we want because we're in a large open environment where we really can't do the intensive clinical care that we want to give. And the Rescue Mission's been wonderful about sending a pop-up clinic over. But still, we'd like to have an internal clinic where our people could go and feel comfortable in the Rescue Mission, and some of the VT residents could come over, write prescriptions for Suboxone. Let me tell you this. We lost 2 of our clients over the weekend, not at Ram House, but passed away. And we had someone that had a very hard medical event for us on Monday. So what I have seen since I got there in March of 2020 compared to now is an escalation of things that, frankly, are frightening to me.
I was just about to ask in terms of what a day, in your life looks like, but it sounds like no day is ever the same. I mean, it sounds like you have challenges every single day, but those challenges are not necessarily the same ones.
Well, I tell you, one of the things that I will say until the end of time is the staff that we have there are complete angels. They work very hard. We don't have much staff. We have very limited staff, but they have huge hearts. They work overtime. They do what they need to do. We had our shelter manager did CPR on someone not 2 months ago.
Wow.
She dealt with someone who was in a severe medical situation Monday. Everybody there has a love for what they do. And they pull together. That's very important. The fact that these people who work for Ram House are so dedicated and they realize how fragile the people are that they're dealing with. One statistic I found from last year that I think will absolutely amaze you, 66% of our clients did not sleep in overnight shelter.
Wow. So that means that they are under bridges and overpasses.
Ram House has the most vulnerable people coming in there. And, a typical day I don't want to talk about myself so much, but a typical day for our staff is dealing with the schizophrenia. We have a lot of people who have it. People think that you just take medicine and you're okay. That's not how things work. We see cycles of people who are on medication. Sometimes they come back and the medication has made them almost catatonic. And then we see, of course, how can they live like that? So I think they don't have the right cocktail of medicine and they stop taking it. And then we watch their escalation of behaviors. And, sometimes they get on each other's nerves. And that, of course, can lead to some chaos. And our staff members are constantly trying to monitor that and to keep people in an atmosphere that they can maintain. We put up with a lot of behaviors because we know the alternative of sending them out the door is worse for them.
Right, of course.
So it's like I said, it's escalated. I see it. The numbers of people that we're seeing. When I first got to Ram House, just pre-COVID, we were feeding about 80 people a day, and now we're talking more 200.
Wow.
I mean, that's a reflection of the economy. We have a lot of senior citizens coming in. Speaking of senior citizens, one of the things I want to tell people too is with COVID, a lot of people weren't paying their rents. A lot of people, landlords sold their properties. And a lot of people who bought those properties have upgraded their properties.
Right.
We didn't see the people we're seeing now. Senior citizens are almost ashamed to come in and ask us for help.
It's heartbreaking.
But when their rents have gone up $200 or $300 and the utility bills have gone up, they're forced to come to us. So there's this escalation of things going on. That's why our Roanoke Times Good Neighbors Fund is so important. That's all private money. We got $200,000 last year to help people with.
You have to.
Yes, yes. So these things that are going on, I think a lot of us, we feel the pinch. When I go to the grocery store, I get angry too, but we don't feel the pinch that the people who are on fixed incomes or who are in the lower middle class are feeling. And everybody, one of the statistics that we've recently put out is, there's a huge percentage of people in the Roanoke Valley who work and are homeless. I think it was like 60 or 70%. I can't remember the exact number.
I think that might surprise listeners to hear that sort of large percentage.
Yes, because everybody assumes that homeless people just get themselves into this. Well, a lot of times if you sit back and you think, well, I've got my mortgage, I've got my health insurance to pay for. What if my spouse should suddenly become ill and can't work anymore and my health insurance falls through? These are people just like everybody else. It is no longer this stereotype of, oh, they don't want to be better. No one wants to sleep outside in 32-degree weather or 95-degree weather. No one wants to pitch a tent and be living there. But, we can't, as a Christian, I don't judge these people. I don't do it. And with all my heart, I feel like they deserve the help.
Right. Well, and in talking about that, I can see just the emotion in your eyes as you speak about this. And so in thinking about, how organizations like yours can't save everybody, you told Aila that in your piece of the story. And so I think about the emotional toll that must take on you and your team. And so I was sort of wondering if you could talk about that, because again, some people might think they just homeless want to be there. They landed there, and now they can't get out of it. But certainly there's so much more to it than that, and particularly for you working on your side of things.
Right. And I'm not even in the depths of it.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm busy. I'm busy making sure the money comes in so we can maintain what's going on and working with our wonderful board and all these other things. But, when I speak to you of losing these people to overdoses and the level of emotion that my staff shows when this stuff happens, if you can imagine, us having to give Narcan to people in the shelter sometimes, the entire staff has been trained on it. Those kind of things and the type of patience that it takes. We have a lot of very needy people, and they come to our staff all day, sometimes with requests that might even be irritating at times. But to have that level of patience and understanding, the staff is just wonderful, and they don't do this for the money.
Right.
I wish I could give them all the money in the world, but that's just not how things work in the social work field, So I would say that they are the real heroes here, not me. What they do is amazing to me, and what they put up with. And sometimes in the mornings, when people are coming in, I can just see the fatigue in their eyes.
And I'm sure they grow close to some of the clients. I mean, you talked about you lost 2 this week. I mean, that's a bad week. They're probably, your staff and your volunteers are probably feeling that because they get to know these folks who come in and seek help.
Well, the severity of it, one thing that I've thought sometimes when I see people, and I don't know them all, and I don't get into all the casework, it's not my job. But sometimes I almost feel like when I'm walking through there, you can see people that almost feel like ghosts to me, like that they're on such an edge. And you see these young women and you see the scars on their skin and, the horrible existences that they lead. I will tell you, though, most of our clients are men and a lot of men of color. And it's just heartbreaking to me to see the level of vulnerability that you see with them. I will say, and I believe this with all my heart, every dollar that comes into Ram House is well spent. Sometimes I'm so amazed at how much we get done giving what our budget is. And think about that. We get $800,000, $900,000 a year. A third of that is going directly into clients' pockets to keep them from becoming homeless in the first place. I'm so proud of what we do. The other reasons we were able to get by with that is the churches. Ram House was founded in 1971. City Council and the ecumenical community came together because they knew there was a need. So you see the well-oiled machine of 52 years that people come in, they bring us water, they bring us food, they bring us paper towels, they bring us gloves, So that's amazing to me. I mean, every day you see this community that's coming into Ram House. And we do have a needs list on our website so people can be aware at all times of what our current needs are. So it's just amazing to me how efficient we are. It's such a well-run machine.
And I hope that those days, those moments where the crew comes in to help, I hope that that's uplifting and gives you the hope that you need to power through the next day, right?
I haven't even started to talk about the volunteers.
Oh, well, we'll get to that in a minute.
Oh, my goodness.
So you noted in the feature how younger people are coming in, which I think is a particularly interesting point. Mentioned that they're often addicted to narcotics and the like. I was wondering if you could expand on the mental health and recovery support that you're implementing for them. You'd hinted at it, but...
Well, this is one of the reasons we need a new building. Okay. But in the atmosphere that we have the homeless reduction, Virginia Homeless Reduction Coalition. They do come in and talk to our clients and help our clients. And we have Support Services LLC that comes in weekly to help our clients. The issues that we do have without having Medicaid providers come in is that we have a shelter manager that's taking care of 75, 100 people a day. And though we can do referrals, and although there are agencies that do come by who are assigned to particular clients, we really want to have more in-house services. That's something that is on our radar that we think is just tantamount to helping the city be successful in reducing the number of people that we're seeing on the streets.
Interesting. So now it's time to shine a light on your volunteers,
because
I see you get choked up, but I know that they're working so hard. So, let's talk about how to highlight them and also, of course, how to encourage others to be part of this group that's working so hard.
We have people, and this is what just amazes me, and the generation is getting older, and we're constantly having to replace people. And people are so busy these days. The people of my generation, and I'm be 61 this month, they've got so much on their plates, and they're doing so much. So a lot of our volunteers are aging out. So come COVID, all of a sudden, I was saying to the people that were over 65, you need to go home.
What a challenge.
Well, what they said to me was, we're not going anywhere.
Really?
God has us. That was their attitude. We have, for example, a huge volunteer base for us is Our Lady of the Nazareth. And those ladies were like, no, God will protect me. And God did, interestingly. But what's happened was we decided when we had COVID to keep the same volunteers coming every week to eliminate exposure, and we closed down their contact from our clients. So we've got really efficient teams Sunday through Saturday. We're open 365, who come in every single week.
Wow.
They're master chefs. They do a fantastic job. But let me say, you do not have to be a master chef to come into Ram House. You can learn how to cook.
Interesting.
Yes, we encourage people who don't have kitchen skills to come in to learn. We have we call them our chefs. We have two. We have Chef Heather and Chef Marquise. And the food at Ram House is really, really good.
I think I need to come in and learn a few tips.
Well, I've had to kind of back off from some of their cooking because I was gaining weight there at Ram House. But at the same time, the people who we serve need a full meal.
Absolutely.
The calories. And people don't know this, but we also give bag lunches to people who are outside at night, and make sure they have food and that they have something to eat and water. We're very careful about that.
Right. Proof that you're working not just inside the building, but outside of it too.
Right. People don't deserve to be hungry. And we're very intense about making sure that that happens for them.
Thank God for you.
Yeah, no, I bet a lot of people wouldn't know this about Ram House either, but we have people that come to Ram House and pick up people to work, to do day work. So a lot of our homeless clients are going out during the day trying to save their pennies to get where they need to get, and we will help them and assist them with security deposits and such to get them into housing.
Right, because that's your ultimate goal, right, is obviously to get them off the streets and into a roof over their head.
It's complicated, though, because if they're not ready to go, it is absolutely a danger to get them housing before they're ready to go into it. It's a danger, too.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't put people in an apartment building that can't maintain themselves.
Right.
You can't do that. For one thing, they aren't going to be there long and you're wasting donor money. And for the other thing, who knows, they could do something to endanger neighbors, So it's a very complex issue.
Right. And I'm not sure about the answer to this, but what about those clients who might have pets, dogs? Do you encounter any of that?
We do periodically. We do not allow that in the shelter unless it's a support dog because it's just too much going on and it would not go over. Yeah. But we do have a group from Virginia Tech that brings a bus to Ram House periodically, and they assist people without question who have income issues. And we've been really excited about being able to do that.
Good. Yeah. Well, if you'd like, now's your chance to give a shout out to anybody and everybody who's helping you so far. If there's a group or organization that you feel particularly attached to that have been super helpful.
Oh gosh, I mean there are so many. I'd like to shout out to Lee Clark at the Rescue Mission.
Yep, who we'll see later in this episode.
He has been wonderful to me since I've been there, and I think the Rescue Mission just works so hard to try to help us, when we have staffing issues or, or really bad weather comes up. And I mean, he has been phenomenal. So I would list him as a major mentor to me and someone who I really like so much. I can't say enough about the churches. Raleigh Court Presbyterian Church in particular, Second Presbyterian Church, but there's so many I hesitate to say.
Of course, we're not going to leave anybody out by naming them. But
and I mean, it's just, I just thought about that. I would say the churches, there's I can't tell you the percentage in our budget, but it's amazing how much that they do help Ram House. We are interfaith, and I really like that aspect of what we do. A lot of our clients have severe mental health issues, and when they come in, we just take them, and we don't, if they ask if we want to pray with them or something, we'll do it, but we're very careful not to push too hard on those things because they have such severe illness. So I love our interfaith aspect too.
Good. Well, thank you to all that you're doing, your staff, your volunteers, the people who are helping Ram House do good things in this community. Thank you. Thank you for all you're doing. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for telling our story. I think we're just kind of a little bit of, although a lot of people know us, I still think we're a little bit of a hidden secret in the Valley. So I really am appreciative of your asking us to come and speaking with us.
And we don't want you to be a secret. We want everyone to know about you so that we can help those in need in our community. Because like you said, it is right in our backyard.
Yes, it is.
And so that is something that we can all do to kind of band together. Thank you again for shining a light on the homelessness issues in our community and for all the work that Ram House does, truly.
Thank you.
Thank you. You can learn more about Ram House located on Campbell Avenue, including how to donate, volunteer, and more at raminc.org. That's raminc.org. Our final segment today highlights another organization that you're probably already familiar with, especially around Thanksgiving with the Drumstick Dash, the Rescue Mission of Roanoke. We're so pleased to welcome CEO Lee Clark to the table today. Thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so glad to have you. So I wanted to first talk about your story and background, if you don't mind kind of explaining how you grew into the role that you're in today.
Oh, my goodness. I feel like it's an ongoing growth. I mean, I'm just like, you're never really prepared for the work that we do. Our organization's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I got started as a volunteer like a lot of folks do. So I started as a volunteer at the time. So weird story, I'm a CPA. I started here in Roanoke 37 years ago. Okay. Worked for Brown Edwards and Company here in town. Great organization. I love them. Still keep in touch with folks there. Went from there to the Roanoke Times, and I was controller, managed the accounting department, and then moved into sales and marketing. And sort of had this weird background. And during that season of my life, I started volunteering at the Rescue Mission and ended up joining the staff and was director of development for about 10 years. left there at a time when it was sort of a next step for me to join the American Red Cross. I was the regional chief operating officer for Virginia. So I traveled all over Virginia with Red Cross and learned so much that I was able to bring back to the rescue mission in 2017. In January 2017, I've been in this role now as CEO for a little over 6 years.
Wow, feels like yesterday and forever ago, right?
It does, absolutely.
Perfect. Well, that's so interesting. Melissa was talking about how her background is sort of like biology and then she ends up in the role she's in today. I love that so many people talk about it's not a major career change, right? It almost seems like it was meant to be. It's all led to this
all
moment.
Works together.
Yeah. So that's great. And so if you don't mind kind of giving a brief, I want to talk about the rescue mission and everything that you're doing. I think it's really important to launch this entire discussion with stating that homelessness is never black and white. No one plans for this. No one wants this. There are any number of reasons that contribute to homelessness. Melissa pointed out there's mental issues and things like that take place. Matt Cruikshank, he is the Roanoke City's Human Services Administrator. He pointed out in our feature in the May-June issue that COVID-19, that pandemic, really exacerbated mental health issues and substance abuse in the community, which of course contributed to the increasing number of homelessness. In addition, the rising cost of housing, utilities, and food are all factors that can lead to this trend. So over the course of 2021, and this is from the time of print that we had, so you might have updated numbers, but in 2021, 1,748 unique individuals were given temporary housing by your shelter.
Yes.
And, the rescue mission currently has an average of about 250 individuals staying at the shelter each night. Is that correct?
That is correct. And that's men, women, and children.
Right.
We have almost a campus of buildings there on 4th Street and Southeast where we have our main building that has our food services. Meals are open to everyone. So you could be staying in our shelter and eat with us, or you could be housed in the community and just be food insecure and not sure where your meal's coming from.
I really want to talk about that later because I think that's a great way to connect the public to people that they see but don't necessarily think of.
Absolutely. You've got that main building with the men's shelter, and then you have a women and children's center for a separate building that is set up for single women or families with kids. And so it's really that 250 a night, that's a little over 1,700 last year, different individuals that came through our doors.
Wow. I mean, that's a lot of people that you're helping. And so brief overview, you do a lot of things for the community. You've talked about meals. So providing meals, emergency shelter, recovery programs, grocery boxes, medical care to those who need it. It's barely scratching the surface. I mean, you guys do so much.
It really is. The medical care has been so key. And, Matt pointed out earlier about the issues around addiction or mental health. We found that having the clinic on site there at the Rescue Mission, the Fralin Free Clinic, has been tremendous asset to really, again, help us meet people right where they are, provide for those issues that might be keeping them out of a safe place. And so really dealing with anxiety, mental illness, addiction, whatever it might be, to help them into a healthy life.
Right, absolutely. And so in talking about other things that you offer, what don't we know? What might we be surprised to learn today?
I think one of the surprising things that I really try to point out to people, especially over these last couple of years when there were so many shutdowns and there were curtails of services and people cutting back or closing, the rescue mission never closes. We're open 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So we literally never close. And so we're always there for people who are in crisis, always there to provide a safe place, always there to provide the counseling, the help, the direction to move forward in a healthy way. And so I think that's one of the things that those of us in our, kind of normal routine of life, you've got your cycle of going to the grocery store and to work and, that sort of routine of your day. You don't think about there being an organization like the Rescue Mission that never closes. It's always there for people in crisis, ready to meet them right where they are.
Really? I mean, you must not sleep. You just have to be there all the time, right?
No. We have a wonderful team and are always there making sure that our team is equipped and trained and ready to go.
Yep. So one thing I learned in researching about what you do for our piece is you also recently launched a podcast like we did.
Yes.
So I loved how you're sharing the stories, not just from your staff and your volunteers, but also the guests. I think that's really important in sharpening the issue to people who might not otherwise understand the experiences that they go through.
Well, Liz, you opened this with the idea that it's complicated. It's not black and white. And when you really hear people's stories, what you learn is that we're all pretty much alike. We're all just people. And some people have had different traumas or experiences or life. I sometimes hear the stories and wonder, how did you survive? How did you live through that and are here in front of me today, functioning, doing well, working, moving on to your next step, because the stories you hear are just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But they're all different. Everyone has a different story, and we just respect that and we honor that, and we really hear those stories and we build relationships with people.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing those stories. Again, I think it's critical for all of us to pitch in and figure out how we help listeners and viewers and readers connect with the people who need some resources and help. So Aila, she went in to tour the medical facility that the Rescue Mission has, and she, you only have so much room in 4 pages, right? It's hard to fit all the important stuff in, but we were wondering if you could expand on the medical services that are offered, how that helps a population that might be skeptical of seeking out medical care.
One of the things I love is that as an organization that's been around for 75 years, we were founded in 1948, downtown in the Market and the awful Arthur's Building downtown. Is just to think about having grown from that humble beginning to the comprehensive services that we offer today. And the clinic is such an important part of that because we continue to innovate, we continue to adapt, we continue to really work to meet people where they are. And the medical component is so important. About 1.5 years ago, we started Medical Street Outreach, where we literally recognized the growing numbers of people who during the pandemic were just unsheltered, just stuck in mental illness or addiction, and they weren't going to come inside anywhere. And so going out to meet them right where they were, providing basic medical care on the street. It's been interesting to adapt from expecting people to come to us to going out to meet people right where they are. We take case management to them. We take the medical care directly to them with the goal of getting them connected to resources. And we work with a lot of partners to do that. So we work with Matt and the HAT team. We work with Melissa and Ram House. We do pop-up clinics all over. We're working with a group of folks right now on Williamson Road, just to take our services out in that corridor as well. And so just really trying to meet people directly where they are, provide that basic medical care. We build relationships, we build trust. Next step is often to get them to come into our clinic and maybe be seen by a doctor provider right there in the clinic or a mental health professional there in the clinic, and then get them connected to our shelter or another place to get them off the street into a safe place.
Right.
And so that has been instrumental, but our clinic is beautiful. It provides medical care, just like urgent care setting, like you might expect if you went into an urgent care.
It's been a few years since I've toured, but it was beautiful then. So I can't imagine. I mean, that was probably 4 or 5 years ago. So at this point, it's gotten even bigger.
Yeah, and dedicated spaces for counseling, for mental health, but also vision care. We have equipment to do eye exams. We have eyeglass frames ready to go. We have a dental area. And all of it primarily staffed by volunteers. And so if you're listening today and you want to help, we need doctors, we need dentists, we need nurses who are willing to come and volunteer an hour or two, once a month, once a week, once a quarter, whatever you can give, we need your help. And honestly, that's really how the Rescue Mission functions and stays open around the clock is through the help of our volunteers who worked so tirelessly to make sure that we're there.
Well, thank you to the volunteers and the physicians and nurses and dentists and everybody else who are taking part in that and helping the community in their way. I mean, that's really what a hopeful thing in my heart to feel right now, because those people are taking time out of their day to help others.
It's absolutely. We saw some of our areas during the pandemic where volunteers cut back, but in the clinic, they never stopped. They actually ramped up their hours, which was incredible, and I'm so grateful for that.
And during a crisis, too. I mean, we really haven't touched on, it's 2023, and, it feels like the pandemic was so long ago, but it wasn't. You're still dealing with the aftermath of a lot of that. Do you feel, was your space more crowded during that time? Or?
It was such an interesting season. I mean, it wasn't anything any of us could have predicted in any kind of way. What we saw was within the shelters, the numbers within the shelters sort of stabilized. There wasn't as much turnover because evictions halted. And so during the height of the pandemic, there weren't as many people coming in every night. We were averaging about 150 people a night. So today, 250. So our numbers are up dramatically today. But what we saw was just that stabilization. So we didn't have as many new people coming in, but people normally that would be leaving into affordable housing weren't able to move out because there was no affordable housing to move out to. And so there was just this period where everything sort of went on hold, but we had to work so tirelessly to keep everybody healthy. And so just ensuring that if we had a case of COVID, that it didn't spread throughout the whole shelter and shut us down.
Really tough. I mean,
it was very tough.
Yeah.
We went from March when the pandemic was announced until September before we had our first case. So we
Wow,
were so
really?
blessed
Golly.
that we were able to keep people safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were creative. We put in hand washing stations in every place we could think of. At every
Mm-hmm.
entry, we had hand sanitizer everywhere, mask for everyone. Our medical providers through the clinic were routinely just meeting with people all the time to keep everybody safe. If we had a case, we were able to be on top of it right away and get that person out of the general shelter into a segregated area so they would be safe and not spread that to others. And so just all those things to have to really think through and work through. But today what we're seeing is just in the height of the pandemic, you continue to see the increase in terms of addiction and mental illness. And so we're seeing some of the sickest people we've ever seen in terms of the issues that they're struggling with.
That's, I mean, not interesting in the interesting way, but like the fact that that's on the rise and that you're seeing that more in your shelter. It's interesting. So another thing that listeners might not know about, Second Helpings is one of my favorite little spots. It's a great spot for lunch.
That's
cool
fun.
stuff to
Yes.
find. I love it. Tell me a little bit about that.
You know what? We have 2 retail stores. We have one there at Second Helpings, which is at Williamson Road, there where the Department of Social Services is, right beyond the Berglund Center. And then another out 460 on King Street. It's called Thrift. And those 2 stores are pretty amazing. We have wonderful partners and donors in the community who give furniture and china and linen and clothing that is gently used. And we're able to turn those things that maybe is sitting around your house that you don't have a lot of use for into food and shelter and clothing and medical care for people in crisis. Right now, our 2 stores provide for about 1/3 of our annual operating budget,
Wow,
which is pretty
1/3.
powerful.
Yeah.
And not only that, but we give away literally thousands of items. So when a person comes in and needs a coat or clothing, shoes, socks, whatever, that's the first priority. Those individuals who need the help, they get it first. And then items are going to the store to be sold. And even we partner with folks in the community. Maybe it's another nonprofit that's doing good work. And if they see someone who needs clothes, they refer them to us and we make sure they get the clothing that they need.
That sounds like a great way for the public to contribute and help
It's
out.
absolutely amazing. And then when somebody moves into their own apartment, we outfit the apartment for them.
how
So we make
great.
sure they get a kitchen table and chairs and pots and pans and all the things they need to get
because,
started.
I mean, that stuff's expensive.
It is.
From
It
scratch.
is.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's fantastic. So actually, the Rescue Mission, you touched on this a little earlier, but they have a policy that allows anyone, not just their guests, to stop in and eat. It's to help build community relations. It's a wonderful idea not to only make people aware, but to engage with your guests. Can you share a little bit more about that?
It is. 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner are open to the public, to anybody who's hungry to come in and eat with us. And we regularly see folks who maybe live around the mission somewhere in Southeast and they'll walk over and have lunch with us, or maybe they'll stop by and drive in, or just the folks who are spending the night in shelter already that would take advantage of those 3 meals a day. And they're delicious meals and pretty amazing. Our team of volunteers and paid staff work tirelessly to ensure the quality and make sure everybody's fed.
Yeah, I love seeing the social media posts of all the groups, especially when it's like high schoolers and learning how to help out and contribute to the community. That's super fun. And they're always in the kitchen. They always look like they're
That's a
having fun.
great place to start volunteering.
No, they look great. So we touched a little bit before we got started. Melissa at Ram House was talking about how a lot of her participation in volunteers and donations comes from interfaith. And so I was curious about people who are seeking your resources and help. It's open to anybody.
Absolutely. The Rescue Mission is a Christian organization. That's who we are. Our faith in Christ is an important component of why we do what we do, but everyone is welcome. There is no need to make a certain statement of faith or to think a certain way or believe a certain way to come in for resources and help. We're there for everyone. We want to shower you with love and attention and get you to the help that you need, and just move out of the crisis. And we do it all in Christ's name, but everyone is welcome.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. I wouldn't want anyone to assume that they're not welcome there because they don't maybe share the exact faith. So I think that's a really important thing to know.
Absolutely.
Perfect. So the last thing we're going to do is shine a light on your volunteers and your staff. Talk about them.
Oh, my goodness. So, again, I already talked about how we're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we have folks who are just tireless. We have individuals who come almost every weekday, like at 4:30 in the morning, to help serve breakfast.
In the morning?
In the morning.
Oh my
So they're
gosh.
there. That's their first.
Angels.
They do it before going to their normal day job. They come in, they serve breakfast, and then they just. I think, you know what? I really believe they feel blessed as well as they're blessing others through their service. And so there's everything from that individual that comes once a week to serve breakfast to maybe somebody who comes once a year and volunteers with the drumstick dash. But over a whole year, we might have 5,000 different volunteers, and we're so, so grateful. Wow. The volunteers are the lifeblood of the rescue mission. And then our staff. I cannot think of a more dedicated group of people. We had a period of time, just like many organizations, where we were understaffed for a little while there during the height of the pandemic, and we were working hard to fill positions. And the staff who were on duty worked tirelessly to be sure that everything stayed open, everything kept running, that we never missed a beat.
I mean, that is so much work.
It is so much work.
A good work, but work.
Yeah. And, we just try to think about how do we take care of our staff? How do we ensure that they are just encouraged and that they have the resources they need? We've really launched a focus on training for our team. Everything from trauma-informed care, just really helping them understand the traumas that people have lived through as they deal with being unsheltered and homeless, to what they might be struggling with addiction, making sure that our staff is equipped to really understand how to best meet people where they are. So there's mental health first aid and trauma-informed care and just de-escalation during a crisis, all those kinds of things that we have to think about in the work that we do to ensure that we're ready for no matter what.
It's easy to see the passion light up in your eyes because you clearly care so much about the organization, the people in it, everybody who's got a part to play in that. And so I was wondering if there was, anything else you wanted to think about or really want our listeners to know about the rescue mission or just the mission in general.
Well, where you started was a great place to kind of wrap up, because when you think about that, it's not black and white, that everyone has a different story. We just invite our community to come alongside us, come help us. We don't do this alone. Melissa's talked about how we work together at Ram House. We've talked about Matt and the homeless assistance team. There are so many of us that are working hard in this space, and we realize that none of us do it by ourselves, and that if you're listening today and you're thinking, gosh, I'd kind of like to help. I'd like to get involved in some way. Please check out rescuemission.net, which is our website. There's a link on there to volunteer. It lists all the volunteer opportunities. And you might look in there and see, well, that's not exactly what I'm thinking about. We had somebody today who's coming in to volunteer for the first time who has an industrial engineering background. She's a recent grad, gotten her master's degree, and she wants to get involved in work like ours. And so she came and said, I'd like to volunteer a few hours. And so she's helping us literally take our aftercare program, which follows people after they've successfully moved out and ensures they continue to stay stable and stay in their housing. She's helping us look at that process and figure out how can we do that better.
That's interesting. And using their skill sets.
Using their skill set. So if you're listening and you've got a particular skill set, you might be a painter, you might be creative, you might be an artist, you might be somebody, an accountant, whoever it might be, please come help us. We need your help. We'll find a place to plug you in and get you going to really get to personally hear some of these stories and meet people who are struggling. And again, just see they're people just like us.
I love it. And so it's not just the Drumstick Dash, although that is one of my favorite events of the year. I mean, and all that money really benefits you. I mean, I know you're not relying on that all year round, but that's a lovely chunk of money to be able to know is coming to help those.
It is. It's one of the most beautiful things in the world to be out on Thanksgiving morning and see just this mass of people out across the streets of downtown Roanoke running or walking together, a sense of community and relationship. And that's what we're all about, building a sense of community and relationship that empowers our community to be better.
That's awesome. And if you want a twist, you could always go to Angels of Assisi and walk some of their adoptable dogs, because I've definitely done that a few years in a row.
Could.
Well, thank you. If there's anything else you'd like to add, we're happy to feature that.
I think just, again, think about the work of the Rescue Mission that never closes, and the fact that every gift counts. We talked a lot about volunteering, but also financial support is needed. So if you'd like to help us out in some way, everything from $5 a month to $50,000 a year, whatever you can do, we need your help. And every dollar works together to make this work possible.
Perfect. Plenty of ways to donate, participate, help, volunteer, maybe work on some people with their teeth if you're a physician or dentist.
Absolutely.
And want to participate there. Thank you so much for being on our show today. We really appreciate it, Lee.
Oh, it's good to be here.
Thank you. All right, listeners, that was Lee Clark, CEO of the Roanoke Rescue Mission, working very hard to help those in need right here in our community. You can learn more about the organization, including how you can help and more, at rescuemission.net. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Roanoke Presents From Print to Podcast, hosted by editor Liz Long. Thanks again to our friends Joe Cobb, Roanoke City Council Vice Mayor, Melissa Woodson of Ram House, and Lee Clark of the Rescue Mission for sharing statistics and insights on how to help those in need right here in our region. Be sure to learn more about their work and organizations and how you can help through volunteerism, donations, and more, and give back to our community. We'll list these helpful resource links on our website over on our podcast page. You can see Aila Boyd's feature on homelessness in the Roanoke Valley, as well as a feel-good story from Sean Nolan on how one local man is helping the homeless by making tiny houses in our May June issue now on newsstands, or read even more at theroanoker.com. We wish you and your family safety, love, and happiness, in addition to that roof over your head and food on the table, and encourage you to get involved in the community to help those in need. Thanks again for listening.